with you, a short your question that you had that stimulated.
Yeah. So, Michael, when we last spoke, we sort of had a nice long conversation. But what I'd love to hear from you is just a quick overview of you, if you don't mind, just about your awakening experience, and then we're going to talk about something really, really important, I think.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I was a teacher for, I think as far as long. I remember lying on the sagebrush hills of Wyoming thinking something was wrong, something terribly wrong. My real seeking started when I was in college, and I picked up a copy of The Golden Bough, which is a study of the comparative religions. And from there on, all the way through marriage and all the way through up until 9 years ago, I searched, I read everything I could. And then in Las Vegas, I started thinking that things in themselves have no actual existential reality. There's no such thing as a river. So I went to bed thinking, as I always did, about one of these topics. And I was thinking, if there's no such thing as things, how real am I? How real am I as a thing? And I started to doze off, and then I started to spin. And it wound up in a vortex that I tried to escape of once it started to really spin. And I thought, you little chicken shit. You're holding for this moment, and now you back away. And so I let go. And it wound up in a meat grinder, terrible experience beyond my conceptualizing mind could not grasp. It could not even wonder about what happened. And I woke up in the morning kind of weeping and thought, oh, this is it. And I looked around at the soft edges of things, and there were still things, but I knew that it was an overlay, a consensus conceptual overlay, and that I was privy to this perspective that all human beings have. It comes to them when they're about 3 or 4. Once they learn the names of everything, and especially the name of themselves, this illusion occurs. And that's where our loneliness comes from. That's where our love comes from. That's where our idea of beauty comes from. Because we're imaginarily separated from the manifested. To me, that sentience has to offer nothing better, as far as we know, in the entire universe. We're the jewel of manifestation. We're literally the light of the world. We can't see ourselves, but we can see each other reflected in each other's eyes. What it's like to be a human. What it's like to be a female.
Yeah. You say that, Mike. Can I just stop you there a minute? Just, Michael, just for 1 second. I'm just looking at my, I'm just going to quickly go into my reception because it's giving me dramas. I'm going to just quickly extend because there's an extension. Oh, it is there. That's okay. Sorry. Maybe it could be coming from your end or some sort of, yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting that too.
That's okay. I'm hearing you. It's beautiful what you said. I heard everything. And yeah, so continue. Sorry, you were saying that you, after that moment of the spinning and the vortex, that you were in a meat grinder, you described it, for a couple of weeks. You were crying and you were...
Well, it all occurred in my house. When I woke up in the morning, it was the softness of Ramana's mind, and it felt like Christ's mind, and like that of all the sages that I had learned to love over the years. We drove through Las Vegas, where we were at the time, and I normally hate Las Vegas. We go there for shows, or did at the time for a business we owned. But everything in Las Vegas was so beautiful. The trees, the grass, manicured grass, the man and the little dog. It was so exquisite. I looked at my wife, and she was so beautiful. And I remembered all the things we'd been through, and what a joy it is to be a human being. I thought of my son, what a joy he's been. What a joy, what a gift it is to be, just to simply be, and to simply be human is the best there is. Oh, I love being a man. And I grew up in a violent alcoholic home, so I didn't trust men, but I do now. I love men. I love women. I love the strength of men, the way they walk and talk, and I love women, the way they hold hands and giggle, interlock arms and walk down the street. I just love everything humanness.
Yeah, and if you look at your old, let's say your old self, but when you remember the way that your mind worked before all this shift, and I mean the shift is an uncomfortable process, obviously, but all your studies that you did, let's say seeking that you did for years and years and years, it's not like you forced anything to happen. It just all happened by itself, and it has to break, doesn't it? Does you feel like it has to break and split open almost?
I don't know. If there were a way to objectify what happens or how our tendency to think of what preceded it caused it, somebody would have figured it out by now. I tend to think that it just some people think that meditation is the path, and some people think that trying to get into now or have a headlessness, or gosh, there's lots of ways that they talk.
Yeah.
I tend to think that any path is part of the dream, and that it substantiates. Having trouble with that word. Yeah, we exist as a separate self who's on a path to find a way out of its imaginary condition.
Yeah.
And will lead us back into the dream.
Yeah, I get that. And I'm finding lately I've been feeling like you go into this separation and then you come out. For me, it's like in and out. I'll get caught up in the story and believing that it's real. So what happens is I'm like watching. It's like almost like I'm watching the persona of, let's call it this, and constantly sort of going, wow, I did a terrible thing last night. I screamed out a word to my daughter, then I'm thinking that I could be losing my mind, and maybe I am, and that's okay. But I said this, I got so angry. I was so in that angry moment, and I called her a whore.
Oh.
I just felt like I had Tourette's syndrome, and I started to think, what in the hell are you doing? What did you do? And I walked over and I came back, and I was laughing hysterically with tears in my eyes. And I looked at her and I said, I'm so sorry. I don't know where that came from. But I was able to get the humor into it, and I wasn't so connected to it and feeling guilty. I just had this laugh moment at myself.
Yeah.
And it's like that.
It's like that. The brain just responds according to its programming. When you were a teenager, maybe a parent called you that. Maybe.
No reason for it, honestly.
Well,
it's so out of character for me, and I just thought I had to laugh, Michael. To laugh. What the hell were you thinking?
What the hell were you thinking? Well, it wasn't you thinking. That's it's this incredibly beautiful, complex brain that doesn't think. It reacts according to its programming. Its programming is intricate. Millions upon millions of tidbits of information picked up ever since you were a baby. It's storing all this stuff. And it creates this hologram of self that it mistakes as a real entity. When the self has no choice at all, it doesn't actually exist. I still have a sense of self, or this brain does, but I know it's a mental fabrication, or it knows its own creation. When I say I, it's always the brain that I'm referring to. So I'm reticent to start off with the brain thinks this or the brain thinks that, but so I say I. But your brain reacted according to its program. It had no time to think about its reactions, and the sense of self emerges downstream from that.
Yeah, I immediately apologized. It was immediate. It wasn't like I played the victim long. I actually laughed, which I thought how delightful to just laugh at a situation. It's just a word. I immediately went over and gave her let her know that I was so sorry. And then we were both laughing because I was so out of character. It's just not like me.
Yeah.
To do that.
Actually, when you say it's not like me, we're referring back to this imaginary character.
Yeah.
And it is. You
Yeah.
are those actions, or you emerge within that reactions. There's no you, really, except the brain's reactions that you emerge within. Somehow that becomes part of your part of your new reality. Because enlightenment is also part of it's still part of the objectified perspective. Most people think that they can escape this dream when they are being dreamt. And if your characters in your nighttime dream and try to escape it, there's no way you're going to get out of it.
Yeah.
That you
It breaks my heart because I belong to a couple of pages that and I mean let's not talk about that because I don't think that I think Nancy talks about not believing in not believing in mental health, that she thinks that the psychologist, and I totally get that because I'm a big advocate for that. It doesn't matter what diagnosis you have. Your mind, let's call it an ill mind, and it could be chemical, it could be whatever. It's the fact that the rejection to self that causes or the rejection to the story that causes that fight flight that causes you to be stuck in that constant turmoil with a story.
Well, you aren't stuck. You are the brain's stuckness. Nancy and I thought we fundamentally disagreed on the use of a psychiatrist and psychologist and even medication.
Yeah.
And I talked to her about that. And actually brought it up in a meeting or one of the Zoom meetings. And I said, Nancy and I disagree on that. And she said, what do we disagree on, Michael? I said, well, the use of medication and the use of psychiatry. She said, I don't disagree with that. I said, I misunderstood. Because my whole family, genetic line, suffers from anxiety. And in some cases, like mine, acute anxiety and panic attacks, which along with all the other things all these things are labeled. I tend to think that this fear, this exaggerated fear and depression kind of go hand in hand. We get depressed because frightened. And my son has this anxiety, a generalized anxiety, sometimes manifesting itself into a more acute forms.
Yeah.
His psychiatrist, I went to her because of tinnitus, which is always screaming in my ears. But then we talked about this stuff, and he had mentioned probably 2 years ago that he was taking something called Lexapro, which is for general anxiety. And he said, Dad, I think you should try this. And I said, because I'm an addictive personality, I don't use any drugs or any alcohol or anything like that. And I said, I'm kind of reticent to that. He said, well, it's not addictive. If you don't like it, you can go with it. So I waited 6 months or a year, and I watched him and his lifestyle, and I thought, well, maybe I'll try it. So, and I did not, which is evidently. And I said, Dad, I'm going to quit. He said, Dad, just stick with it for 2 weeks. And I did. And I can honestly say that the anxiety, the generalized anxiety, is gone. Sometimes it taps me on the shoulder.
Yeah.
And I'm 77, so I don't care. If I make my life easier, if anybody can make their life easier, with the possible exception of anything that ends in Pam, Pam, or all the other Pams, those can be addicted. Now, if I can't get sleep at night, and I can't because it's very quiet and my ears, due to damage I've done to them over the years, are screaming, and I just cannot get to sleep, I'll take a Lexapro.
Yeah.
with the psychiatrist, and my doctor said at the very low dosage I'm taking, both of us said, don't worry about becoming addicted. And my son said, Dad, why would you even worried about becoming addicted? Even if they say you won't, if you did, so what? And I thought, yeah, I have doctors now. So, like all of us, my days are numbered. And so, if I can make it easier, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
If I can sleep and I don't have to worry about getting to sleep, which has caused a problem in itself, I'll take a pill and I go to sleep. It takes a while, but I'll
Yeah.
stop and I'm asleep. So I just don't care anymore. And I don't talk to people normally about this stuff. I'm not as far from an authority on anything. But there are people who know more about these things than us. There are psychiatrists generally. I trust my medical doctor. When something's wrong with me, he went to school for a long time. They're all good guessers. That's what they do. But it's an educated guess. So if somebody talks to me who appears to be in clinical depression, I try to avoid recommendations of any type other than finding a good therapist or psychotherapist who knows, who's been to war, who's been to mines, who's fought these dragons, these black dogs, as Lincoln called them, Abraham Lincoln. Terrible, terrible expressions. This burden on his shoulders too. His son died. His wife was busy, and it must have been terrible for him. But so I don't recommend medication, but I do recommend seeking out a professional who could very likely. There's a bad. Everybody says, "Oh, don't get involved with drugs," and geez, they're not authorities. They don't know. They're just scaring people unnecessarily, I think.
Unnecessarily. I like that because I like I say, I'm in this page, and every now and then I might throw a comment in there, and I will say things like, you're looking at it, and when you're looking at it, and when it'll focus, it'll actually expand, and then like a domino effect, it affects your whole day. But I mean, just simple things, and you talk about some people go to meditation. For me to get out of my 3 month where I completely lost myself, I think I've spoken to you about that. I had to, let's call it neuroplasticity, because I had to repeat a series of words, and it took almost 2 or 3 days for my subconscious mind to adopt those words, even though I didn't believe any of them. That process helped me. I know it did. And it started to help me eat. It started to help me sleep, and I was able to function where I was almost ready to end my life. So if that worked for me, I whether it's imaginary or, if it worked for me, then I sit on top of the mountain and scream it to everybody. Listen, this is what I tried. I can only point. If it works for you, great. I'm not anywhere near, like you say, an expert, my brain counselling and all that I learned. Most of my experience comes from, like you, fighting my own demons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The body heals itself naturally. I've watched as a carpenter, and everything happens to you. You fall off of roofs, and bruises and sprains and deep cuts. But I've watched over the years how I look at my hands and look at the scars. Your body heals itself easily and naturally without thinking about it. I believe that the mind does that too. That the mind that's twisted or bent or sprained can heal itself. And somehow we seek out something, healers, doctors, to help us. And sometimes when our mind is bent, a psychiatrist, a loving, gentle psychiatrist who's been to war, and most of them have. That's why they went to psychiatry generally. Maybe that's always, I don't know. But I happen to find this psychologist who was a little lady in a wheelchair, and her mother used to grab her by the hair and throw her around the room when she was little. So she was from panic attacks and depression. She'd been on the front lines since she was a little girl. So she said, "Oh yeah, those are called panic attacks, and I have them too." It been often. Am I thinking I was going the way? Our sharing, our love, and over a year or so, I learned to love her. I still do. I still love her. I can see her in her wheelchair. She had 2 little boys and a husband who adored her. I loved her and she loved me. We laughed and cried together. It wasn't a normal therapist session. It was sharing our hearts and our love. It was beautiful. And I don't know. I think suicide is, everybody considers that more than once in their life. It would be terrible. Life would be terrible without that possibility. If we had to live forever. And there was a young man in town who I knew and loved very much. He was a very nice, beautiful young man. Beautiful wife, 2 beautiful little boys. And they found him hanging from a tree. And his dad had committed suicide. It runs in the family. And it's a mind that's tormented. It's just wired in such a way that it's tormented. And maybe suicide is not. In AA, they say, "Oh, you always shoot the wrong fella." And we used to laugh at that and think it was funny, but even suicide seems natural to me now. And I'm old enough where I've had several friends committed suicide, and it breaks. They leave themselves hanging in the closet.
Yeah.
Do it because I didn't want to leave that on my children and grandchildren. Or your father committed suicide, or your grandfather committed suicide. So I hung on.
And thank God you did.
Well,
what would you say to somebody who wants to commit suicide? I mean, obviously you're not for or against, but if you could say a couple of words to somebody who wants to die, what would you say?
Oh, I can't think of hypotheticals. I just can't. Whatever this is arises in the moment. I learned to trust that working hospice. I was afraid for my first client. My knees were shaking, literally shaking when I knocked on the door. And I went over the book 3 or 4 times the night before I had to see him. And I was knocking at the door, and the lady said, "Oh, God, thank God you're here." She said, "We didn't know what to expect about death. We've never been around it." Of course, I took a Greek class, and I didn't know either. So I went into the room where he was, and I went down to level where he was and introduced myself. And it all came so naturally. I went to one house where a man had just died, and they were carrying him out. And I knocked on the door, and the mother was sitting quietly in that dark grief. And I said, "Hello." She said, "Hello, Michael. I'm glad you're here." And I smiled at her. And I could see someone sobbing in the back bedroom, and just sobbing, deep sobs. That's the type of sob that we all know. And if we're fortunate. And I went back and sat next to her, and she was sobbing still. Her mother said, "Honey, this is Michael. He'll help you." And I thought, God, this was interesting. He didn't have anything like this in the class. So I'm thinking, what am I going to say to him? So I went through all the Hallmarkian. That's a card company that sells cards. All the sayings that normally, and I thought, that's just so superficial.
Yeah.
She finally stopped sobbing and looked at me with those dark eyes, empty eyes. And I said, "It's all right to cry." I said, "You just lost a father." And I didn't plan on saying that, but it seemed perfect. It's all right to cry. You just lost your father. And I'm sure he was loving because the grief she felt.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't plan on saying that. Then I started to really this. The longer I did it for 10 years, so the easier it got, and the less I said. It's just somebody willing to be with them when they're dying. Relatives will come over, they don't touch them. They don't rub their hands and feet and kiss their foreheads. So the hospice worker will say, "Have you ever had a hand massage?" "No." "Would you like to try?" So that's one of the classes. And it feels good to have a hand massage. Then you say, "How about we massage those feet? They get dry." And if they don't, but you say,
To a person, you mean to a person who's dying, Michael?
I'm sorry?
You're talking about to a person who's dying, or who's somebody who's experienced grief? They're dying.
Yes.
Yeah.
And usually within 2 or 3 weeks before they die. They can have 6 months with most hospices. But we get them 2 or 3 weeks because relatives are reticent to call the hospice to admit that they are indeed dying. And doctors are reticent to tell people about hospice because all of their effort has been in saving lives. And so they don't want to admit. But rarely does a doctor, even now, refer patients to hospice. And they can have 6 months of incredibly talented people, nurses, registered nurses, home health aides, bathing, surgery, doctors.
I don't know how to mute myself because you can hear a plane here. And I'm trying to mute myself because there's already like there's some hissing when you're talking. So can you hear the plane?
I cannot.
Okay, so I'm wondering whether that's interfering with you talking, some noise. And then usually on Zoom you have a mute button, but I don't know where to find the mute button. So just so that you can keep talking without hearing this. Oh, here it is.
Okay. We were talking about hospice. Excuse me. And the care that's available that most people don't take advantage of until 3 or 4 weeks, or 2 or 3 weeks before someone dies. So by the time we got there as volunteers, the person was pretty close to dying. But there is this wonderful give and take between a volunteer and a hospice client. Just being willing to be with them, to accompany this journey to the edge of everything with them. Just to be with it and not frown and cry like quite often relatives do. Sometimes you laugh, sometimes you cry. They say in hospice, they always new volunteers would ask, "Can I cry?" And I help teach classes, and I would say, "Would you want a hospice volunteer that couldn't cry?" But you never cry more than the patient does. You don't break down and sob. You can have tears. That's natural because you miss them already, because you've fallen in love by that time. I had one client who had been a captain in the Army in World War II, and movie star looking man. I saw pictures of him and his medals, and God, I can only imagine his life. But one time I said, "Bill, would you like to have your feet massaged?" I said, "They get dry, and it's just nice to have them have some oil rubbed in." He says, "Oh, for Christ's sakes, no." I said, "Okay. How about your hands?" He said, "Yeah, I can go for that." I said, "Okay." So I massaged his hands, and a couple days went by, and I said, "How about we go for those feet before they get too dry?" He says, "All right, for Christ's sake, let's try it." So I did, and he said, "Oh, God, that feels good. It feels so good to have our feet massaged. Most people have never had a foot massage or a hand massage." So every time I go, I'd massage his feet. We talk about the war because they don't talk about it to their relatives, but they have some things they want to get off their shoulders sometimes. One time I was in the bathroom and the door was closed. I'm there too long. I said, "You all right?" Quiet. I said, "You all right, Bill?" He says, "I can't wipe myself." I said, open the door, I'll help you. Oh, for Christ's sakes, no. I said, you would help me, wouldn't you? He said, yeah, I would. Okay, I said, let's go for it. So I helped wife him, and we were laughing like two good friends do. I know he'd help me. Somebody in one of the classes says, I can do everything but change diapers. And I never had to change a diaper in 10 years, but there are occasions when that would happen. So I said, well, what's in it? Well, they thought for a while. The only alternative is to let somebody on their own. That's worse.
Yes. So you just became there, just completely open and loving and supportive, just naturally, whatever arose in those moments, because I guess you probably saw how precious life is. And you wanted to make sure that the moment that you shared with them was beautiful and it was loving. When I lost my father, Michael, in 2013, my mum and I went in on, I think, the day before he died, and they put him on the floor because he was getting away. So they put the bed on the floor with another mattress, and I think they'd already connected one of those morphine patch things on his leg. And when we walked in, he was facing the wall on the floor, opposite way of the bed, and he had one hand like he was unraveled, and me and my mum were in shock. So I just looked at me, and she looked at me, and this little 4 foot nothing woman walks in, and she was a volunteer, and she just came straight down on her knees, and she said hi to us, and she went on her knees, and she went and rubbed his head and kissed him on the head, and then she unraveled his arm, and she said, darling. She said, oh, darling, you're a bit stuck there, aren't you? We were just, me and my mum were like, we just didn't know what to do. We just froze. And then the tears, of course, came out with all of us. Yeah. And I just embraced her, and, I cried as well, because she helped that process just by being loving and being warm. And I just, to this day, will never forget her. She loved him like she knew him forever.
Oh, true. It is like you love them, like you've loved them and known forever. Every one of them. Some of them are cranky, and some of them are in pain, and they don't want pain relievers. And doctors don't quite often want to have them have morphine because they're afraid they'll get addicted. Who knows what goes along with that thinking? But I would always say, but when I got there, I'd say, "Are you in pain?" And there's surprisingly little pain in death nowadays. It used to be agonizing with cancer, and before they have 4 tiers of pain relievers, and I think morphine is like third. There's ones that are more powerful than that. So 99% of pain is gone from death now. And morphine leaves them quite well. There's always a bottle of morphine in the refrigerator. And as a volunteer, we're allowed to put a pre-measured amount below their lip here. You just put a few drops normally, 3 or 4 drops, whatever the things call for. But if they didn't have somebody forgot to leave a pre-measured amount, I would take 3 or 4 drops out, do it myself. One man said, oh, we talked for a while the way men do. Some men want men. They don't want a woman when they're dying. There's very few men in hospice. So I always got, as the years progressed, I got the hardest cases, which I kind of liked more, I think. One guy said, we talked for a while. He says, well, I guess I need an enema. And we're not supposed to give enemas. We're volunteers. Even the home health aides are not supposed to. The nurses can. But we're not to do that as volunteers. And our nurses were like an hour away. So I could have called him. By the time they found a nurse, it could be an hour and a half. And so I said, are you uncomfortable? He said, I really am. I said, well, when our kids were young, when they had a high temperature, they used to give them tepid enemas, just lukewarm enemas. So I've given enemas before. So I know what I'm doing. So I says, okay, let's go for it. So he said, okay. So we went in, and I gave him an enema. And he came out from the restroom. I said, You feel better? He said, I do. I said, good. I didn't tell him not to tell. I didn't care. They weren't paying me anything anyway. Uh, but love overcame any desire to even remain a hospice volunteer. I thought if they get caught, they're not going to sue me. Or maybe they will. I think I'll win.
Can you imagine court case over an enema? No, I don't think so. That was wonderful that you could do that.
I would have gotten terminated. My dear friend who was a hospice nurse, who I love, they have 3, 4, 5, 8 or 9 clients at a time. I had 2 at one time, and I started to get panic, anxiety, high anxiety. But they're on call 24 hours a day.
They're so busy.
Oh God, I love them. Every nurse I've ever met, I love. My granddaughter is becoming a nurse. It makes me happy. But oh God, the hospice nurses are heroes. So loving. I had one client who was his midbrain had started to reactivate. Touch all the home health aides. In my case, were women, generally younger women, because they have to lift men.
Yeah,
have to be young and strong. So he wanted to touch him, and so they always kind of outskirted him, kind of outplayed him, and could move past him. But he was pretty tenacious. And so I was talking to him one day, trying to talk him out of that as best I could. He says, I just want to touch him, Michael. I said, I understand. I did understand. We're men. We got this midbrain. Women have this midbrain. We're all human beings. I said, I understand. I do. I said, but it scares them a little. They don't know quite how to handle that. Some of them may have been mistreated when they were little or taken advantage of. So it scares them a little bit. He says, oh, I never thought about it that way. And the nurse who was dealing with him all this time, beautiful woman, the one I was talking about, they fired because she let a little information out about one of the clients, and they fired her. So it's pretty tightly wound. And it probably should be too, because it eliminates any possible harm. And I think volunteers could do. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I always wonder what 3 or 4 drops of morphine would do to us. Gosh, I'll be the first volunteer that will get his name in the paper. For this first dose.
We're lucky to die these days, aren't we? Really, unless it's not the death, the dead person. It's more the people who are left to live behind. What one minute they're here, the next minute they're not here, and how do I process that? And especially from a parent's perspective, losing a child, and I constantly I have nightmares about losing I've got 5, and I have nightmares, maybe because I've watched a movie or something stuck in the brain. I don't know, but just how do you even get over that? How do you even function after you've lost a child?
Oh, it's dark for a long time. There's bereavement groups, which I did for widows and widowers. And I always thought I'd like to do one for children, but I never got a chance. There are bereavement groups for people who lose pets, because that's a very close relationship. I believe that the person that we most love in life is the biggest mirror to see our own beauty. They're the big mirrors. When those get broken, there's a huge emptiness in our life. No longer is life coming in through that mirror. It's gone, and it won't be back. There are smaller mirrors, and we miss them. But the person we miss the most is the biggest mirror. I had 2 daughters and 1 son, and now I have 1 daughter and 1 son.
Oh.
So it happens to all of us.
I didn't know. So sorry, Michael. I honestly didn't know.
You sweetheart. We had friends who had a little 2-year-old, Sarah. She used to call me Muck. Oh, Muck, Muck. She was so damn cute. She didn't want, she did that baby screwed on her butt across the floor. Oh, everyone loved Sarah. And one day, the mother came home and she had drowned in the bathtub. And I know, the same effect. I thought, and what happens to anybody when someone close to them dies? People avoid them because they're afraid to say the wrong thing. So the sense of loneliness increases. Nobody comes them. So this was years ago, years before I was in hospice, and I thought, oh God, I can't face them. I miss Sarah so much. I can't face the parents. But I did. I found myself driving over to their house, knocking on their door. They came with those eyes, dark, empty eyes. And I put my arm around the mother. She had left Sarah with the babysitter.
Oh, God.
It's too young. Forgot about Sarah in the bathtub. So the mother was tortured. And the father, too. They were still together when we saw them 20-some years later, and this little bicycle was sitting by the fireplace. In hospice work, I meet people in the grocery store who have lost a husband, because it's a very little town. We all know, or we all knew what's going on before the virus, but did you hear so-and-so? Say no. So you see them in the store, and you walk up and look at them, and wait for the next logical thing. You don't worry about what's coming out, what you're going to say. Quite often you just hug them. They rest their head on your shoulder, and they'll cry. You cry too. But it's all, you're not afraid of death anymore. You're not afraid of your own death.
You're not, Michael?
No. I know what it's like. You just gradually come unraveled. You never actually existed except as this swirling collage of memories, beliefs, holographic phantom emerging in the object of mind. So as the memories start to become unraveled, you start to disappear. And you hold their hand, and you put a cool washcloth on their forehead. With deep breaths, you have a big cotton swab that you dip in water. You put it on your lips because they get dry. And you bend down and kiss them on the forehead. And they smile. And you sit down and hold your hand. Quite often it's a bony little hand. And you hold it softly, and you move it like this, softly. In some ways, relatives don't normally do that. And my wife laid her head on her shoulder for 4 hours. My wife has terrible time standing. She has ankle bone on ankle bone. She stood there for 4 hours with her head in her mother's neck. It was so loving. Died. She looked around the room with baby blue eyes, and it's a hospital room, sterile, and all the tubes and buzzers and nurses walking back and forth. She looked around the room. Beautiful. It's so beautiful. Everything's so beautiful.
Oh, really?
Sometimes,
yeah.
Sometimes that lucid moment comes before. I've seen it in other people. They do this. I think maybe for the first time they're seeing how beautiful everything is. That's available. That's available right now. How beautiful you are. What a loving. The light, shining, backlit hair.
I'm seeing the beautiful shiny eyes and the genuineness in your everything, Michael. You're looking at me, I'm looking at you. We become each other, don't we?
I get loopy. I get loopy in the beauty of being human. I can see my humanness only through you. I can see my femaleness, the gentleness of the female. through you. I get to feel that. The way women walk and talk and whip their hair. I love them. I love them. Whitman said, I love the young women. They're beautiful. He says, I love the older ones more. They're more years on the front lines, more battle scars, more tear tracks. I love it.
Beautiful battle lines, and yeah, I agree with you. It's a toughie because we're in this dream that it is a dream, because I see that now. We're in this dream of show and tell, and recognizing that there is. Well, I still can't sit there and say there. Me. I mean, I do understand the concept that we're all fabricated beings, that we create story. This beautiful heart, this skin, this persona is here, and this persona is experiencing the story through my own mind. So there is no one here. That's a hard one to sort of really swallow.
Yeah, itself will never realize that it doesn't exist.
But when you say it doesn't exist, to me, I see it as if I'm not here.
When people ask to point to themselves, if you ask 100 people to point, would you point towards yourself? Where are you? Who are you? Where? Point to yourself.
Point to myself? What do you mean, point to myself?
Yeah. It's always to the chest.
Yeah.
Here I am. Never up here. Yeah, here I am. Right here.
I'm doing a love heart. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Nobody ever does that. Here I am. The self never realizes that it's a mental fabrication. It can never realize that it doesn't exist. That's the seeker's dilemma. The brain trying to use its sense of self, using the very tools out of which it emerges, the objectified reality, using words to find what exists only in words. And it's a circular, self-referential, closed loop. It'll never understand who it is, because it isn't.
But if you look at somebody who's got you've probably seen this, dementia, and it becomes where the person's hallucinating, complete different story. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know what they're thinking. They're not here anymore, but they are here. But you can't reach them anymore. They've gone somewhere else, in a sense.
Yeah, the brain is starting to lose its memories and its reference points. It's relying on, it's rather like the center breaks free and kind of flows throughout the brain. The brain is trying to find something out of something that's actually coming apart. In Alzheimer's, there's these like holes in the brain. The connection between the neurons is breaking up. So it's relying on a smaller group of memories, and it's frustrating and scary. It's scary for the brain. So it does these things to get along, to make sense of its world, and it can be terribly uncomfortable, not only for the person going through it or the brain, but for the relatives. In Alzheimer's, you can see a mom disappear and not recognize her anymore. It's like they're gone. They are.
Yeah.
The mother knew.
So, Michael, that's still a body that's there. I mean, you know how you were talking before about there is the disappearance of you, that there is no you. The person who's got Alzheimer's and becomes, let's say, nil and void, it's lost the connections with the neurons. It's still, the person's still there.
Sure. The body.
The body, yeah.
The body is in the physical world, which is alien to the sense of self, which lives in the dream of the brain. That's having, through the objectified perspective of its it's a consensus conceptual overlay that's mistaken for reality. And this sense of personal identity is sent out into a world that, for all intents and purposes, amounts to a dream in search of its own relevance, when it has none. It doesn't actually exist. And that's the seeker. That's what my wife, one time I asked my wife, do you ever wonder who you are? What's going on? What the hell's going on? And she said,
no.
People don't.
I love it. I mean, if I could choose, I mean, honestly, if I could choose, I wouldn't have this complex brain.
No, no. That's what I love about you.
Really?
You'd never have met if you.
Oh gosh, it's just, if I could say one thing, if I was to be analysed, I don't think that would find that I'm sane.
Oh no, that doesn't mean anything. Sane is just a word.
Yeah, I know.
And it's not even normal. Nobody's sane.
I
call
agree.
it perspective going sane. We're all God. We're all so unique, and so I mean we're a totally different galaxy of memories and beliefs and opinions swirling around this empty center. It's a storm. It never stops. 24 hours a day. It continues in your dreams, whether you remember them or not. The brain's doing stuff. I jump around. I kick ass in my dreams. My wife has to wake me up because I grew up in Wyoming in a fighting society. And my family was a fighting family. When we fought, there was blood on the ceiling. So, well, I don't run from anybody in my dreams anymore. I'll stand my ground and I'll just until my wife wakes me up. And sometimes I get mad at her because I wanted to finish a fight. So,
I love it. I know that one. I'm not afraid in my dreams anymore either. I'm conquering my dreams. I love it.
Remember your dreams, you will, but you may not want to. It doesn't matter. But one time somebody grabbed my wife's hair in a dream and he pulled her head back so hard and she makes a sound that she makes when she's hurt. Like over the years, one time she hurt herself in the garage and with a deep cut and she made this sound. She made that sound. And I saw him do it. This is in my dream. So I'm going to get this guy. And I think one of those things when my wife woke me up. And I really wanted to get him. And the next night, I tried to dream him up again. So I could just beat the hell out of him. And when I mentioned this in Rainbows, and Nancy says, I'll help you kick his ass. Because she met Dee, my wife, and she loves Dee too. And Dee loves her. When we met Nancy at the Nancy Nethercutt at a small coffee shop, we were talking like light and stuff and everything. And she reached over and touched my wife's arm and grabbed and held it. And my wife started to cry. And she's never done that before. It was so sweet. It was just, and she loves Nancy. And I tell people that I love Rainbows all the time, men and women.
How can you not love Nancy? Can you not love her?
Well, I love everybody now.
Yes.
I don't have any enemies. I don't have anybody.
I agree.
Everybody's so lovely because I don't see they don't have a choice. Their brain reacts and they emerge within that belief and choice. And also you start to forgive yourself. I regret some of the things I've done, but I love myself regretting them and know that my brain reacted according to its children.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change anything. Not a thing in my life. I don't
That's
think
beautiful. That's so beautiful to hear that. And if you had a week to live, what would you leave the world? What would you say?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. We joke about what we want as an epitaph on our dream, and I always come up with something that I forgot the last one, but that was funny too. I forgot it. It's okay. It doesn't need.
It's okay. I memory. My memory is shocking. I'm 57 and I feel like I'm losing my memory.
That's part of the blessing. You don't have to know all that stuff anymore. You don't have to carry all that useless information around. The brain is sorting and storing what's important to it. If somebody busted through the door and threatened to hurt your girls, they better watch out. You'd be on them like white on snow.
Yeah, you would. Absolutely.
Thinking about it, you would be there. So what you need is still there, and it will be until you start to come unraveled. But that's not happening. Don't compare yourself to anybody.
Yeah. I've already made the video for my children for when I die. I've already made it.
That's good.
The last final words. Thanks. Thank you. That would be a good one. Thank you for existing, whoever you are, whatever you are.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that's natural. My my whole family, we play with babies and we go in their neck, So if I'm around, even because they're both in college now, but if we start to wrestle and I go for their neck, they go like this.
I love it. You should go in and kiss into the neck.
And when they're babies, little babies, and then as older we start to wrestle, it turns into an area you go for when it's exposed, and you go. So we are highly sensitized. My son, still you can't do it to him. So what was I going to say about that? I forgot.
Yeah, it's funny because I just saw you doing that to the children in my mind. You'd be so cheeky with them. How much love can you get out of a person or give a person? I'm the same with babies. I absolutely smell them and just.
So beautiful. Even after they're out of the bath, they have this baby smell, and I think they have this cute little face for a reason, and that smell, because we want to protect them, we want to love them. Some scientists think that women's breasts have this same scent to it, that it has that appeal
for the baby. Yeah,
and adult men. That same appeal. It's the last part of the body that they insist on covering. It used to be the ankle. The knee. So there's something so beautiful about nature. Walt Whitman said he loves the smell of his own armpits. He was so beautiful. He was gay.
Yeah.
And he soothed the wounds of soldiers in the Civil War hospitals, which were terrible.
Who was this, Michael?
Walt Whitman. His most famous collection is Leaves of Grass. He's a famous American poet.
Walt Whitman,
Walt,
Okay.
He wrote Leaves of Grass. And incredibly, most people thought he was too sensuous. But he probably was, but God, he's powerful. He talks about a partner laying in the sun in a meadow, and his partner thrusts their tongue into his chest. You remember the feeling of the first kiss, the dizziness of that.
Yeah.
That goes all. Oh, I mean, that to me thrusts his tongue into his chest. So sensuous, lifey. So human.
So human. Exactly.
So beautiful. Humans are so beautiful. Everything. Dogs.
Yeah.
Zoom meeting brought a picture of his little chihuahua and showed him to us. He loved the chihuahua. It's did we get off topic?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's just past the hour too, Em, and I think we pretty much have talked about what I wanted to talk about, and the fact is that death isn't so bad. Death is I think it's a preoccupation and that's the false evidence appearing real, which tells you that death is a bad thing when it's really not. It's actually a really beautiful thing. It's a final destination, isn't it? It's a final rest place.
It's not. It is real because the body will die. The self never lived, so we lose the fear of death of it. But the body is going to die. We know that. That can make the world incredibly much more beautiful, just for being. When you look at their hair, look at their adolescent issues, all these hormones. all the boyfriends.
Yeah.
It was on talking to each other sometimes. And, all that stuff. Look at them through the eyes of life expressing itself. I always think when a child talks back to a parent, it's a good sign. They're testing their power. They're seeing. They're testing their safe place.
Absolutely.
Can be powerful. You have to set boundaries. You have to, somebody said, gradually increase the size of the playpen. You have to hold the same face and love him no matter what. I didn't care if he was gay. I didn't care if he robbed banks. I'd always be here for him. Call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'll come. No questions asked. Lots of times over the years. And he's the most loving and gentle human being I've ever known. I just dearly love him.
Of course he is. He's your son.
Well, he taught me how to be a father. I didn't know how to be. My father was a racist. My wife and my son taught me everything I needed to know. We get to color in areas that were uncolored when we were little.
Yeah. Yeah. How beautiful. And how lucky are they to have you, Michael?
Well, how lucky we all are to have you.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
A sense of loneliness comes with this illusion of separation. That is part of our condition.
Yeah. It was beautiful to see you, Michael. Honestly, it was just lovely to see you. And I want to try and join now with daylight savings. I might join one of your chats now because I think we get an extra hour, which means that I could possibly join. So I'll come into Rainbows maybe soon and join your chats. Yeah, I'd love to keep going, but I'm going to keep this beautiful memento. I'm going to just stop recording, and I might even post it. And thank you so much for all your input in this conversation today. It's been a real pleasure.
Every little change is equal. There's no one that gains more. It's this dancing in the light of each other.
Yeah, and I just appreciate that I got a chance to actually have you to look at. This recording will always be there, and to me that's huge. So thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Hopefully, maybe I can get to speak to. I wanted to speak to a few others, but I thank you once again, and I'll stop the recording. Just let me